Hey, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon session here in day two of the 22nd Annual Family Cafe. Thanks for joining us. Once again, my name is Jeremy Countryman. I'm the program director here at the Family Cafe. I have Nikki Germain here with me. She's the youth advisor here in our office and does a lot of the work with the Florida Youth Council. The reason she's here with us is because the Florida Youth Council is going to be delivering our session this afternoon. It's all about siblings. It's called How Having a Sibling Affected My Childhood. Before I throw it over to Nikki, I just want to remind you that if you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and enter those in the comment thread on Facebook Live. And we'll leave some time at the end of the presentation to get to some of those questions. So if you do have questions, please do share them with us. So here's Nikki to introduce this afternoon session and introduce herself as well.
Hi, I'm Nikki Germain. I am the youth advisor here at Family Cafe. I am over the Florida Youth Council, and I would like to hand it off to Alex.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you to everyone for joining in on this session. Like Nikki said, my name is Alex. I've been part of the Florida Youth Council for 2 years. And before we dive into our session, I just want to say thank you for joining in through Facebook Live. And if you are interested in wanting to join the Florida Youth Council and provide leadership and advocacy, make sure you go on our website at thefloridayouthcouncil.org and make sure you print out an application so you can fax it over to our Family Cafe office. And what better time to have this type of discussion with our siblings? And I want to introduce my brother Chris and what he does.
Hi, I am Christian. My brother calls me Chris. I am one of 3 older brothers, and I am thankful to be here. And I am a private school boarding director.
And we're going to pass it over to our fellow council members and their siblings.
Hi, I'm Chevy, and I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I have been in the Florida Youth Council for the past 5 years, and I'm excited to be here. I also have siblings that couldn't make it today, but I do have 2 brothers, and so I'll be excited to share.
Hi, I'm Brandon. I've been on the council for 1 year. It's been a lot of fun for that 1 year, but yeah. This is my sister. I'm gonna let her talk for a little bit now.
Hi, my name is Destiny. I have 3 siblings, 1 older and 2 younger sisters. And I'm currently enrolled in high school. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christina. I've been on the council for the past 8 years. Yes, and I have 1 sibling.
Well, thank you guys for joining me on this Saturday, and thank you to our siblings for joining us. So now, I wanted to bring up the discussion when it comes to people who have siblings and siblings with disabilities and how it affected them. My first question, I just want to go out to my brother, and I want to ask him, how was it growing up? Especially me, since I have Asperger's syndrome. How has that affected you growing up? He had to deal with me all his life. So,
to address that question, it was growing up. It was different. I actually did not think too much of his disability or the needs of him, and I would say like my stages were inconsistent. Like very young, I didn't think too much. Knowing what I know now, it would save so much time of arguments between each other, that civil rivalry, if I actually took the time to listen to my mother and know what we were going through. But because of him and everything, I think it was just a great gateway for me into what I'm doing now in helping others in the medical field and being where I work at that helps out with students at the school with disabilities.
Now, for the core conversation that we all have here, is that for a young person with a disability, growing up with a sibling who does not have a disability can affect them deeply. And as what my brother explained, since there was this sibling rivalry that he mentioned, that anybody in their household could have that amongst each other. It builds up a sort of conflict that can overwhelm each other, and not just there's it's not like this this brotherly love that we have, or for those of you who are watching, it could be a brotherly love or sisterly love, but it was more of there was really um, this rivalry that you have amongst each other, and sometimes there's no really communication that's being brought up or understanding of each other. So I wanted to bring up this question, and I wanted to ask Christina that was there any type of struggles that you encounter amongst you and your siblings? Was there did you have a relationship with your siblings? Was it a great relationship? I want you, if you for the best of your abilities, if you want to answer that question.
It's a good relationship between me and my siblings. I still have a good relationship with my youngest sibling. I'm actually a middle child, so it was just hard growing up with an older sibling and a younger sibling. But we had a good relationship.
Chevy, what about you? What was your relationship like with your siblings?
My relationship with my siblings are, I think, kind of everybody's relationship. You know, we argued, we fought, um, we love each other. Depends on the day, type of thing. Uh, whether do I think that it mattered that I had a disability? Um, Honestly, no, because I have two brothers, and I'm pretty sure we still played Power Rangers the same way. We kind of did a wrestling too. It may have helped me a little bit more to know how to defend myself. And coming from my brother's side, because we talk about things like this, um, he kind of just says like no, because I was there before they were, so they came in knowing that I was the boss, and they just kind of flowed with it.
I like how you smile when you say that, like you're the boss. It's like, hey, I'm the oldest, so y'all listen to me, all right? So I don't want to hear none of you. I don't want to hear no nonsense from y'all. Brandon, what about you? What was your relationship like with you and Destiny?
I want to say it's a normal brother-sister relationship. We fight a lot, and then we like make up like 10 minutes after and just laugh about why we fought. Um, I don't think my disability really got in the way of that. I feel like it's just always been put on the back burner. It's like no one ever really thinks about it unless you look for it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I feel like we had a pretty normal relationship, brother sister wise. Yeah, we've done some stupid things together. We've had a lot of fun. Got hurt. But that's what you do with your sister. So.
What about you, Destiny? How was growing up with Brandon was like?
It was fun. It was normal. Yes. I don't know how I would explain it. It's like any of my other siblings. It was a great relationship. So.
Well, that's great. And the most important thing for all of us is that we had to make sure that if you wanted to build a bridge of like communicating with your siblings and build upon that relationship that we have, I think what really counts is that since most of you who have answered that you have all a great relationship with your brother or sister, it sounds like to me that you guys have really good memories, and also hopefully you guys can create more memories in the future. But for me growing up, I would say for my brother, like we didn't really get along that well, unfortunately. Well, in the beginning, because sometimes I just think that, oh, maybe he's the problem or maybe I'm the problem. But um, I would say probably when I was a kid, I didn't really understand like really good social skills, and I didn't understand how to communicate properly with anybody. And that kind of played an effect because since I was kind of very recluse most of the time, and I didn't really want to be bothered by anybody, and it did later on affected, throughout my teenage years, and then um, building upon that relationship with my brothers, since I have three older brothers and I'm the youngest. So I guess there was a lot of um, not say pressure, but I will say it was more of, well, how can I explain it? I think it was more of that there was this overwhelming environmental factors that did play along throughout our time when we were growing up. And I, you know, my brother and I, getting older now is, and looking back into it, yeah, it doesn't make us like doesn't make us cringe, yes, but at the same time, we kind of learn and grow from there. And we still, we do communicate, amongst each other, not uh, every single day, but frequently we do. And we still have that, brotherly love because, hey, we're from the city of brotherly love. So I guess that's kind of, the fate that we have together. But um, one thing I know that is really important for everybody who is listening, I think I think it's okay that maybe uh, you can have that rough start to your relationship, but unfortunately there are some people, especially people with disabilities, that never really reconciled with their siblings, and unfortunately there's some to this day that never really wanted to ask for forgiveness or make amends amongst each other. So my other question that I wanted to bring out, and this goes to Chevy, um, how was the family dynamic helped you get through those years of struggle, and how you managed to overcome, those struggles? Like, since I know you probably have brothers or your siblings will really help you out in, certain parts of your life. How did that affected you personally?
Um, well, I would say that due to the fact that I am um African American, but I'm also from the Caribbean. So idealistically, they're very community type, and I think that helped a lot growing up because I just knew that they would be there for me. However, they're they're also with having that culture, you at least in the American culture, it's it's not really, that you're going to have this disability and that you can make the best of it. And for, I would say, more the early part of my life, lots of my family members weren't understanding and sort of ignorant towards what was necessary to kind of raise me properly. Uh, the good thing is that I was raised with my parents, and so are my brothers. So all we ever knew was, sure, you might not be able to, walk these 5 miles, but let's figure out a way that we can make it work. We never changed anything. I didn't have any adaptive equipment. I thought it was really cool once I found out. But uh, and while that could have been a hindrance, I think for me it was a good thing because I learned how to do things without people catering to me.
And for Brandon, what about you? Do you think that if let's say if you didn't have a disability, speaking hypothetically, would your family members would have treated you any differently?
I believe so. Like, I don't think they would realize they would, but I could see them definitely treating me differently. Excuse me. Because I'll ask for like the car to hang out with my friends, and me having no depth perception, legally blind and whatnot, it's kind of like a whole another thought process to see like what if like, I can't tell distance, so it's kind of like that's a really big play depending on weather and time and all that, along with like sports and stuff because I have a higher chance of me getting hurt. Um, I feel like they're understanding of like my position, so they let me do a lot of the things I want to do, but there's also like limits, so I don't get in danger and all that. Um, that's I think that's and then I feel like they would treat me differently in the end, without realizing it. Yes.
Now, the reason why when I brought up this question was because going back to the sibling rivalry, um, I read an article where from Psychology Today, one of our council members, Leah, thank you, Leah, for bringing this up to me. And there were times where, for the last few years, the growing number of people, or especially children with disabilities, are increasing. So they're going to be coming in higher rates. And for those that may not understand that sooner or later that it could be your brother, your sister, or if for those of you that are raised in a single parent household, like if they meet somebody, they may have a children with a disability, and that could be your future stepsister, stepbrother. You can have your cousins, with disabilities, and you can have, if you decide to have children on your own and they have a disability, that's something that's going to be growing out of the numbers as reported. But siblings are the most closest thing, or actually the most critical thing that can affect on a person like myself and those of you with siblings, because they're the ones that you can rely on too. At the same time, they're not just somebody who's, if you have a friend and if things unfortunately don't go too well, then you're going to have to maybe deal with a breakup or end of a friendship, and the only people that you have around you is going to be your family. Now, some of you may disagree, say, well, sometimes I may not have the best relationship with my siblings, but they're the only ones that we still have, because once you have siblings, you're siblings for life. So even if my brother and I, we didn't really have that best relationship growing up, we still have to reconcile to make amends, and put our differences aside. And if there's something that he needs help from me, or if I need help from him, he'll be gladly going upon and do something like that. So this article, another article that I found out about the rivalry and hatred of disabled siblings. This was by Ariella Baker. This was wrote back in 2014, that she was writing about a friend of hers who had a disability, and that friend had a sibling, but they never had the best relationship. And just to have a little brief synopsis here, since there was no proper function among communications amongst each other, unfortunately, they actually didn't really get to reconcile their differences and to try to help each other build up that relationship that they needed to be. And since the person who wrote the article describing her friend that she has, a spinal muscular atrophy, which is a physical disability, that person and the sibling unfortunately didn't really make amends, and that person who's actually practically always healthy unfortunately had passed away without actually making amends to their sibling. And why I think is important, because going back to what I said about we can ask for forgiveness amongst each other even if you still have that sibling rivalry. So my next question goes out to Christina. And Christina, sorry. Hey, Christina, was there a time that was there anything that happened between conflict between you and your sibling?
I'm sorry, Alex, I didn't understand the question very well.
Sorry. Okay. Um, Knowing that you and your sibling had your differences, like, were there any fights or anything that kind of bothered you um, for quite some time, and for a while you did not want to, forgive or apologize to your sibling, or if someone did something wrong to you, uh, and they never say, they never apologize to what they did to you. Do you ever felt that there was some sort of resentment towards your sibling?
No, because when we usually like had fights or something, we just like cool off a few minutes and then just say we're sorry to each other after that. So
Okay. Chevy, um, the same question will go for you. Was there any dynamic that was going on between you and your sibling in that occasion?
For me, like kind of like Christina said, like we argue, we fight just like everybody else, but definitely, you know, they're the only ones that can call me a big head, and I'm the only ones that can call them, ugly, and not really mean it. No one else can do that, but I can. So I think for me, that's how that was. But I do want to. You talked about other parts of the article that um, kind of had to do with how our siblings sort of may have helped us or hurt us technically. Um, with that, and I just wanted to mention that for me, it was really a unique experience because I have cerebral palsy, and my younger brother was one when things started to sort of go along the line there, and I actually learned to walk because I was jealous of him learning to walk, and I needed attention. So I figured out how to walk by copying him. So I think that the article's kind of right. They can help you, and sometimes they hurt you.
No, I do agree. It's just the one thing that, you know, the main point of about it is that, we don't have, if there's anybody else that won't be able to help us in the long run, then all we have is, our siblings able to communicate with. And I want to bring this question to you. The times that, when we have this little petty arguments and fights all the time, like, did you think that, those arguments or those fights kind of just, well, it's just a brotherly, it's just like a brotherly love or sibling rivalry type of relationship? Or do you think that possibility, since we never really talked to each other as much, did that kind of, affected our relationship in the long run?
I would say in the very beginning that it was just like me not thinking of your disability or anything like that. It was just simple, like, this is how my older brothers, your older brothers, did to me. So I was thinking like it's the same thing. It just keeps going. But knowing that you were the youngest, there was also that nurture feeling that you got more of the attention. But I think it was just I didn't consider majority of like what was going on in your head. And as I said, like if I knew now what I did before then, was I could have just taken the time to like relax and not get so aggressive towards you and just think that it was nothing, and just thinking that it was just like how brothers are to each other, boys being boys. So
With that, we try to keep on, try to segue at least for a little bit. How when having, myself having a disability, and then with brothers, it also leads to the environmental factors of things that may have happened like in school that since, I mean, even though we never really gone to school together, probably like elementary school, but for some that maybe, you know, that were kind of close with their siblings, that dynamic kind of helped. Uh, it kind of helped, but also at the same time, the environment of the school kind of played a huge toll in my life since, most importantly, I would probably say since before I even like step forward to like a public school, they want to put me in a private institution. And since that kind of like, you know, they already kind of discriminated me before I even got a chance to show up or give me a chance. But I know that since we kind of grew up in a very strict household, it was kind of like, you know, well, if things go wrong and if um, if you were like hurt or something like that, you know, you have to like, you know, toughen it up because, you know, you got to toughen up in front of dad, you got to toughen up in front of mom. You just got to, you know, don't feel like you don't need to have this vulnerability to express, you know, yourself and to everyone. My question that I want to ask Chevy is that um, when my brother mentioned about that they never looked at the disability, they only emotionally looked at that person without understanding it. But there are times that maybe not your siblings, but other family members didn't understand how you have handled your circumstances and what did really, or did your brothers at times, or let's say if your siblings over time have a better understanding that they perceived when it comes to people with disabilities?
I definitely believe that their outlook and their perception of the world is different, and they don't necessarily judge the same way that others would, a person with a disability. But sometimes too, coming from their perspective, they thought that everyone with a disability could do the things that I could do, and sometimes that wasn't the case. So it did give them a good outlook, but at times it was maybe a slanted one or bias because that's just what they were used to. Um, and as far as other family members, you know, it's just difficult. Some people didn't really want to learn about it, so um, even now they see it as something different.
Now, I know like the institution that you work in, I know you have worked with people with disabilities. Is that something that did that kind of help you in the long run to understand like, you know, what are the certain accommodations that people will have, and that way it can actually help you understand like what their resources that they need?
Yeah, for where I work at, we are close hand in hand with students who have disabilities, and it goes from something as either minor to major help. And I would say, like, having being able to actually go to these conferences with our parents has put a perspective that if it wasn't for any of this, I would not be where I am. I would not be looking at the same kids and how to handle their confrontations. So, in a way, what we've been through, what we went through, has helped indeed look at how a school system can adjust and aid in those that really need it and provide so that everybody can live successful lives, um, can proceed forward and be successful citizens where they live at.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with you there. It's just, I think, you know, throughout little brief history of people with disabilities, like, you know, there's always to have like accommodations and always to help them grow. Like for me, when I had, you know, accommodations growing up, like it's supposed to help, you know, me grow and help me to try to handle what the school system is. But even if, with going back to what I said, the environmental factors of, you know, getting bullied at school or being disrespected and then going home and then have to deal with, you know, the same kind of disrespect that I have from my household. Like, even though, like, when you mentioned about, you guys can pick on me, we had this petty arguments, they would, it would just not, it was not just something that, oh, it was just petty arguments. It was just more of like, great. Now the drama that I had to deal with at school is bringing it at home. And I did not want to bring any issues at home because I just want to leave it there. But unfortunately, since there was the more constant harassment and bullying at home, you guys may not see it that way. You or Gami may not see it that way. Sometimes Nathan may not see it that way. Um, it still plays a huge effect on me because of my behavior. And that's why over time, when it changes, when I got older and started, that early teenager stage, that's when it kind of progressively got worse. And I started to, feel resentment, feel apathy, feel, I would say, towards like certain parts of jealousy. And that to me, it did felt that if there was no hope that I was ever going to change, like nothing in the matter of my household or out there was not going to change me, because I felt that's how I will not go as far as to say being that edgy teenager. It was just more of that I just at one point, with all the factors that played an effect in my life, it just never recuperated. It never wanted to, that feeling of edginess and pettiness didn't go away. And so that's something that it could lead on to for other people that don't want to understand it. And then when people didn't bother to ask, like, instead of just the how can I say this to you, that routine questions were like, how was your day? How was work? How was school? How was this? But one thing that I thought that people tend to forget was, are you happy right now? And I don't think that with from my siblings at the time, I didn't think that they would not ask me that question, because then they would just see me as, oh, I'm just this little troublemaker, little brat that thinks that he can get away with stuff. But I just didn't really understand the proper social skills that I need. Even if growing up with older brothers, I still didn't feel like I progressed to that standard. So when you have those type of dysfunctional relationships and environments, and trust me, not every family is perfect. They don't have that perfect life, or they have their own dysfunctions between themselves. But when it comes to having that dysfunctional relationship with your sibling, it does lean into the fact that sooner or later, once you get older, it's not like you just don't want to talk to them. You don't think that they even exist anymore, or they're dead to you. And that is something that it will not just hurt your sibling, but it will hurt you in the long run as well. So my question to Brandon, was there at times that you felt that you were, I would say, like, if you were out of touch with your family, or were there times where you got left out in certain things that you wanted to do with your siblings, or did that really affected you in a sort of way now that you're much more older now?
Everything was more based around my younger sisters, since if they couldn't do it, no one could, if that makes sense. But at school that was definitely a factor. At home, it didn't really matter at all, and I was included with almost everything, unless I just didn't want to play with like dolls or something. But I mean,
Well, the reason why I asked you that is because I know that, since you have a sibling on here, and I don't want to put you guys on the spot there. I know that possibility you may have those type of dysfunctions, growing up. Not like to say, like, I wasn't there, so I will not know, your answer. But I know that I know that possibility. You may be thinking that was there certain, or maybe sorry, I don't want to say I know. Maybe that there's a possible like dysfunction that can actually affected you in some sort of ways. Was there anything like that that if you wanted to share, that's fine. I mean, it's not really a yes or no question, but
I think being able to take my sisters out for like a day and hang out, I think my vision restricted that from happening due to that being dangerous, if that makes sense. You know, I can't, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but yeah. I couldn't really do all the things I wanted to because of my vision. That was a big factor in it, but yeah, that's the best I can explain it. So.
oh, sorry about that. What about you? Do you think that that played that effect, on you sometimes because like you're trying to have a relationship with your younger brother, but there was really no communication whatsoever between us to help build that relationship together?
I feel like a part of that actually does deal with not only between siblings is parents and how they pursue the care and the straightforwardness. I think for a majority of the time, parents can have a great impact on teaching their offspring, their children, that the issues that are going on and not try to keep things so hush hush and try to hide things, like the fact of like nowadays we're open, the society has opened up and we're talking about things that we haven't talked about in a long time. We're bringing up issues that we thought was the norm, and I think that's one of the other aspects, like the talking about it, being in your face, letting know that, hey, there's certain things that you need to know to understand about your brother, would have gone a great long way. Because as I said, like I at one point never thought of anything that was wrong. I just was just thinking that you're just how I am. There's no disadvantage. There's no way things are going how I perceive them to be. So I'm glad nowadays it's a whole different perspective, but I think it could have been a clearer thing to understand.
So I know certain people, especially certain people that siblings who are non-disabled, um, they don't certain people, they don't like the term special needs. It's because according to the Ariella Baker article that I'm citing, it says the term special needs used to describe people, particularly children with disabilities, is damaging for a relationship between disabled and non-disabled. The term implies that the disabled child's needs are special and their siblings are not. And just wanted to let you guys think about that, if you agree with that statement or not. I wanted to bring out, I want to bring in Chevy. Sorry, I don't want to put you in the spotlight again. Did that, what I mentioned about the whole term, did that place any idea from your siblings that think that, well, since you need to have more close attention than, or getting more attention than them, did that actually affected that sort of dynamic between you and your siblings? Does that make sense?
Definitely know what you're asking. I think that my situation is really unique because I was the older one and I just have a really like, you're gonna do what I say kind of attitude, as you know. Um, so they've never said that to me, and kind of what they always say is that it was sort of valuable for them to have a sister with a disability because we got on all the rides. When everybody was being nice to me, they also had to be nice to them. And even now, sometimes if they want to go to a concert, they're like, "Hey, you want to go to that concert, right? Because if you do, we can get closer up." And I'm like, "Sure." So I think that it could have been taken that way, but for our family and for my siblings, they didn't take it that way.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of like the old saying goes, the golden rule is respect. I respect you, you respect me, and that's something that, as long as you have that type of, relationship where everybody can, respect each other regardless of who they are, that's something that really helps in the long run. When you have the syllogisms of an ambulance, where uh, these two sides may not able to, I would say, not say coexist, but two sides may not have that um, proper communication amongst each other, because there is no relationship if you can't really build upon that. Now, I know you were mentioning to me about the whole term when it comes to like special needs, how like I'm getting more focused on, like, if you want to explain that, like how did that affected you for that term alone for what I said.
Um, well, it was just different. Like being told you're different from somebody else, and um, visibly not being able to see what was so different. Like just took in consideration like what makes somebody special.
Mhm.
It's just what was so wrong about you, what was so wrong about like a couple of our family members, and it just made you question like what was going on, when there's something that you couldn't see. And even later on, majority of our siblings being able to not have that mental capacity as what we have now. So it's so quick to say like, hey, this is what you are, without really understanding it growing up. So it's something that it needs to be. I think it should be approached better, versus just saying a label, just saying something.
Right, because either way, you just have to embrace that common bond that we have together. I'm a person with disability. I'm gonna have a disability for the rest of my life, and there's nothing that's gonna change. What factors in and what's not. And so, for anybody, especially this is for people. I'm just gonna say, this is a question for like, for Christina, Chevy, and Brandon. I'm gonna start with Christina. Um, One thing I wanted to ask you, um, when you found out about your diagnosis, how did your siblings react? Um, were you overwhelmed by it? Were you kind of confused? Um, did they understand it like later on, like getting to know a little bit, better about you?
Well, my one sibling, she's actually no longer here. She had a difficult time understanding, and my younger sibling, once she got older, she started understanding. But at the time, they did not understand what was going on with me. When we first learned about my diagnosis for disabilities.
How did finding out that diagnosis affected you personally?
Well, I didn't know about my diagnosis until I was like around 7 or 8 years old, because I was diagnosed when I was in a newborn stage. So I didn't know about it until I was older.
Okay. Okay. But it didn't, you didn't feel like overwhelmed or like confused about it or anything like that.
I was overwhelmed with the hearing hearing one because I couldn't understand what people were telling me. So it overwhelmed me a lot.
Sorry about that. I muted myself again. Um, Chevy, what about you? Did you feel like do you feel overwhelmed about, the diagnosis, and how did your siblings react to that um, once they understood, your disability?
Um, well, I don't think that they or I really like did not know or understand that I was different. I mean, for me, it's very physical. So if you don't if you don't notice that, I don't know what's going on. But uh, definitely, I think that once it was sort of, I guess, maybe pointed out by somebody else, it might have been um, a little bit difficult for them to accept the way that someone was speaking about their sister. Um, Interestingly enough, because of doing this live, I found out that lots of fights and arguments and friends that they, just didn't introduce me to was because they had something to say about that. So um, I don't think that they themselves had a problem with it, but I do think that it probably really affected the people they chose to have around them, and probably that I choose to have around me.
Thank you for sharing that. Brandon, what about you in your part?
I feel like when I found out that I was legally blind and had zero depth perception, like my life was gonna like be ruined and all that because I had dedicated everything to the military, and yeah, it was like a big shell shock. It's like not everything goes to plan, but thankfully somehow it worked out, which I'm thankful for. Um, Sibling wise, I don't think they really cared. I don't think they were noticed. My bad, noticed all that much. I feel like they just see me as the same brother and just didn't really treat me any differently. They're just like, okay, he has glasses, it's fine. I mean, she's getting glasses too, so she's gonna be with me, and but so that's pretty cool. Well, it's iffy, but yeah.
Yeah, it looked like Destiny was about to slap you right there when she's when you mentioned. Uh, but but yeah, understandable. I just want to ask, like, how was, I know we were kind of little kids at the time, but how did my diagnosis kind of affected you, or at least what got me, since he has a some form of disability as well. Like, how did that reaction play the part?
Um, for as I think for our family, it was different because we all were. I think we moved too many times when we were young, and then coming down here in Florida at an elementary put us in a different dynamic. So a lot of the environment was a huge impact to how we were. Um, I would say involved, but I don't know. It was just different. Like when we were being told that we are going to like different classes versus like normal people, and like what is normal, what is different, what is um like what were these things that just made somebody not normal, you know?
All right, and that goes forth, that possibility. I didn't really understood what really autism was or what Asperger was until like I was maybe in my maybe when I was starting to become a teenager and trying to understand. I mean, because I couldn't even understand my own disability. So when they said I have this, obsessive behavior disorder along with Asperger's, like you guys may notice it, but I don't. You guys may clearly see like I can have something that's very repetitive and still keep going, and maybe have the same conversations, and I may not notice it, or repeating the same, or playing the same video games growing up on Nintendo 64. I've been playing the exact same level, and like I may not notice it. And to shine a light on that, with um, lots of therapy and more social communication amongst, not just with you guys, but with everybody else, I I feel that it did help me in the long run to try to understand myself, but still understand my siblings as well. And even though, with all of us, us as a family and still have that dynamic amongst each other, we may not be perfect, but we still able to manage how to, handle those obstacles, together. And even if like, you know, with the things that happen, with our family currently, we still share that, that strong bond that, you can have at least, and I don't want to sound like being preachy, but you can have that, forgiveness and that faith, I guess, amongst each other. And don't like, we never actually gave, even though we may not really communicate that much, but we never actually gave up on each other.
Yeah, I would say also is that no matter what was going on, especially outside of the family, the school environments and all that stuff, those roles played a huge impact of how we were thinking of others were thinking about you, and for anybody else that was thought about, especially with the special needs classes that are implemented in the public schooling, um, that you start thinking, you start feeling so much when other people are judging and everything.
Yeah.
So it was to make sure things are you can't think of other things like that. You gotta be there.
Just real quick, I know we're out of time here. First things first, I just want to ask Christina, Chevy, and Brandon, like, what was your favorite childhood memory, just real quick, with your sibling?
Going on vacations with them.
Can I go? Okay. So there's this one time where we were riding four-wheeler, right? And we flew off this cliff. That's pretty much it. We flew off the cliff and crashed. That was fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about it. Thank you.
All right, guys, thanks very much. That was definitely interesting presentation for everybody. I know that we're kind of out at the end of the hour now. And I know that there are a couple questions that were in the comments that we're not going to quite have time to get to. I will tell everybody that, first of all, you can go to those comments on Facebook, and I'm sure that Nikki or someone else from the Youth Council will be looking through those and can give you answers right there in the comments section, since we didn't have a lot of time to do the Q&A here at the end of this session. There were a couple questions about the Youth Council and kind of what it is and what it does. So Nikki, maybe you want to address that real quick, just give people a real quick overview of, how do you qualify to be on the council, and sort of a thumbnail of what the council does.
Okay, so in order to qualify to be on the council, you have to be 15 to 30 with disabilities.
And you have to live in Florida too.
And you have, yes,
Yeah.
you have to live in Florida. And so they advocate, and they also help the younger members, the older members help the younger members become leaders. They do a lot here in the state of Florida. They help out in their communities. They volunteer in their communities. So if you do that in your community and you're an all around advocate for people with disabilities and you have a disability yourself and you're anywhere from 15 to 30, we would love to have you on the Florida Youth Council.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Before we close out day 2 here, I just want to remind you of a couple things. First of all, we are taking tomorrow off since it's Sunday, so we'll be back at 11 o'clock in the morning on Monday. So please tune into Facebook Live then for day 3 of our 22nd Annual Family Cafe. I also wanted to give you another quick reminder about our virtual duck race, which is going on. You can find information about that on our Facebook page. Our friends at the Florida Disabled Outdoors Association that normally host the duck race at the actual in-person conference are doing it online. So you can still purchase ducks, but the race is happening at 5 o'clock this afternoon. So if you want to be involved, make sure you go check that out before 5 o'clock. So from the Family Cafe studio, that's about it for today. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you on Monday morning at 11 o'clock.
Have a great day, everyone.